Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's session. My name is Francis de Jonkere, and I have the pleasure of being your host today for a journey on restoring trust in analytics through governance. If you're tuning in here today, your relationship with governance probably falls into one of three categories. You're somewhere with too much governance, and you feel restricted by red tape. You are somewhere with no governance at all, and you're living in the Wild West. Or you've been told you should care about governance, but frankly have no idea what it is. If you're in any of these categories, you're in the right place. So go ahead to the chat box and let us know what brings you here today. What governance model are you experiencing? In terms of an agenda, we're going to go over three key areas. First, we'll cover industry trends driving the need for governance and some pitfalls that arise when you don't have it. Second, we'll talk about Governance 101 and what is it. And third, we'll cover a couple governance strategies you should be thinking about in your own implementations. So let's go ahead and get started. Trend number 1, data explosion. This one should be obvious to you, but has to be said. Being data-driven has become essential to compete. Executives know this, business users know this, everybody knows this. It has led to an explosion of data collected, as well as an explosion of the number of people wanting to explore that data. This trend isn't slowing down. Every dashboard we launch fuels the need for 3 more dashboards and 10 more questions. Trend number 2, end users expect more access with their data. A user presented with a dashboard quickly has new questions outside that dashboard's scope and has an expectation to be able to self-serve those questions. This definition of self-serving has matured. It started on the left with, just give me the data. Let me export to Excel and I'll crack on my own. But this exposes users to the downsides of operating in Excel. Version control, security issues, risk of human error, or the lack of visibility in how the data is used. So we moved on to a filter frenzy. Let's add every filter under the sun, and we don't need to pivot the data in Excel. Yes, this reduces the risk of Excel spreadsheets, but it creates another problem. Every time a user wants a new filter, they have to justify a request to the centralized analytics team. That could take days, weeks, or months for something as inconsequential as an extra filter. This is a bad experience for the end user and takes the centralized team away from high impact work. Which takes us to the final stage, full data exploration. This is where end users hop right into the data sources themselves, answering questions they have and finding new questions they didn't know they had, all without having to explain business-specific metrics to the more generalist centralized teams. To the end user, this is logical. It's my data. Why can't I explore it the way I want to? And while every organization strives to promote this self-service to support their claim of being a data-driven organization, the analytics perspective tells us this is more complicated. We don't have the controls, the roles, or processes in place to trust data with everyone, and there can be real consequences as a result. Let's go over a couple of those. As I go through these, give me some buzz and chatter in the chat box if you're seeing these at your company. Number 1, rise of the reconciliation meeting. We all know the feeling. You're in a conference room and someone displays a number to support their new initiative. Then finance comes up and says, we have a different number. Which number is right? Nobody in the room knows. The frustration between teams grow, credibility in the data sinks, and a chain of meetings are scheduled to understand why. This is a total waste of time for everyone involved. Number 2, appearing on front page news. With all the data everywhere, it's hard to keep track of which of it is sensitive and even tougher to track which applications of that sensitive data are breaking data regulations. The consequences of not knowing it is growing with every multi-$100 million fine issued. Number 3, slow dashboards, the loading circle of death. We see this story with clients all the time. The buzz from early Tableau successes explodes the interest to engage, and this interest carries a wide level of skill sets that isn't always led with performance best practices. Performance on the whole server slows down little by little until it's no longer acceptable, and deployments out of fear of making it worse get stuck in a cycle of turning new users away, frustrating existing users with slow performance, and not having budget or direction on what to do about it. And number 4, hard to find content. With more users partaking, we see a proliferation of ungoverned and uncontrolled content. This is a product of enthusiasm, which is great, but if you don't bring in governance, you'll end up with so many things everywhere that it becomes hard for users to understand where to find things and to distinguish what is trustworthy and what isn't. With all of these tangible consequences, we're starting to ask ourselves, why would we promote self-service? It is so much easier to stay centralized and control all of these variables. The answer to that lies in trend number 3. Our traditional analytics models are becoming overwhelmed. When we speak analytics models, we typically talk about these 3: centralized, federated, and self-governing. Organizations typically start on the left with a centralized analytics model, where all data access is restricted to one team who builds out dashboards for a bulk of viewers. It's typically used for complex data or sensitive data for teams like HR or finance, or sometimes it's political, as a team likes the recognition they're receiving. While this is the most effective route for control, this does not scale, because as the centralized team generates value, the numbers of viewers grow, and the centralized approach of few develop, many view overwhelms the team. Either the team staffs more analysts to maintain low-impact work like filter additions or slight view enhancements, or the team finds allies in the business that they trust and shift to a federated model. In this model, you'll see an increased collaboration between IT and the business with roles like marketing analyst, operations analyst, or data stewards. Direct data access is restricted to these trusted users who will develop content for their bulk of viewers. But similarly, this model does not scale. As the federated analysts generate value, the number of viewers grow, and the federated approach of some develop, many view overwhelms the team. Either the team staffs more analysts to maintain low-impact work, or they once again open access, allowing everyone to connect and participate in the self-governing model. In a self-governed model, there is strong collaboration between IT and the business. IT set clear governance controls, roles, and processes in place. Business users are enabled to connect to permissioned, trusted data and have the flexibility to create and publish content according to their certification process. This collaboration creates a shared playground where everyone is invested in the performance, health, and organization of the system. It sounds great, doesn't it? And here come the skeptics. Francis, what about all those headaches we just talked about? Self-governing leads to reconciliation meetings and data risks and slow dashboards. How can we just ignore all of that? And this is where a sound governance strategy comes into play. One where the goal becomes enabling analytics for everyone responsibly, not restricting. Here, we define governance as the set of controls, roles, and processes that generate analytics trust and gets the right data to the right people at the right time with trust and accuracy. This governance framework should balance security and privacy with openness and sharing, and should support 3 key objectives. It should empower people to answer their own questions while discovering new ones. It should enable people to easily share their insights with others. And it should ensure the data supporting their decisions are accurate, trusted, and secure. Governance is not a set it and forget it one-time decision. Different data requires different kinds of governance, and the flexibility allowed can increase as the skills and expectations of your user base matures. We divide governance into 2 categories. On the left, we have data governance, ensuring the accuracy and trust of the data to help users make decisions. And on the right, we have content governance, ensuring users quickly find, share, and once again, trust workbooks and data sources. And along the wheel, we have our ingredients of people, processes, and technology to boost accountability and enable access to secure and trusted data for all skill levels in your organization. Let's start with the ingredients for data governance. Once again, our goal with data governance is to generate trust. If the data does not feel they are being empowered, or if there are too many restrictions required to access their data, they will not trust the system you set up, and they'll find a way to access their data off the grid via the black market. This is when users find data through shady measures, download to Excel, share via email, and does who knows what with it. To keep them in your governed systems, your data governance strategy must make it easy for users to find, understand, and quickly trust the data. Down the road, well, we won't talk about that. We'll eventually talk about that later. First step, making it easy for your users to find their data. We call this data source management, and your strategy around it is all about data discoverability. How will your users find data sources to both start new projects or enhance existing ones? Think back to our centralized model. If a user has a new project, they start with a business case and set of requirements to the centralized team. If it's an enhancement to an existing view, it's typically an email request and some crossing of fingers. This is typically done because users don't know where to find the data themselves. If users had the ability to search and connect directly to the data sources, the savvy ones would skip the back and forths and go right to self-serving. Another positive effect of data source management strategy is that it raises the bar on what a finished analytics project looks like. Before, the dashboard was king. It was the only finished product and was expected to answer 100% of questions. And this is an unrealistic request unless your BI team is very good at reading tea leaves. So it inevitably becomes a never-ending back and forth IT cycle. With an effective data source management strategy, a finished product is an uncluttered dashboard that answers 60% of questions, accompanied by a published data source for end users to self-service any remaining inquiries. But once users find a data source, how can they know to trust it? Here I've looked up the term assets, and it comes up with 442 results. All of you out there who are living in the wild west of governance, you're familiar with this. Which data source is the right one? This is where your data certification strategy kicks in. Not all users will necessarily want to know how the sausage was made, but they'll want assurances that a process was followed. At Tableau, we use the green checkmark to indicate when a data source is verified. This checkmark indicates that a certification process involving data stewards, project leaders, and analysts was followed to ensure that the data was enriched, checked for quality, that documentation was submitted for transparency, and that the data source is ready for use to the wider audience. What does this look like? Two components of this certification process are data quality and enrichment. As you know, raw data is never perfect, but your analytics platform allows you to clean, combine, and shape your data to establish standards of truth. Here you're looking at Tableau prep flows that marry data sources together, filter out duplicates, standardize calculations, group dimensions around shared business logic, and does anything to make the data more accurate and usable. Great. The data is clean and the job is done. Not so fast. It's not enough to just fix the data, hand it to users, and tell them, trust me, it's good. You need to provide users an understanding of what happened so they don't have to base their decisions just on your word. That's where a thoughtful metadata management strategy comes into play. It provides the resources to quickly bring users up to speed on the cleaning measures taken on the data before it got to them, and assures them that their niche specifications are incorporated into that cleaning. In a centralized model, viewers are forced to trust the quality of the dashboard data and will only find out otherwise after painstaking investigation, or worse, when simple errors are pointed out mid-presentation. Don't do this to your users. Provide transparency with an effective metadata management strategy and allow them to participate and verify your cleaning steps to proactively point out if any steps are missing. Many customers will have a checklist of necessary steps before metadata is complete. Those can be cleaning steps like, are superfluous fields hidden? Or transparency steps like, is the owner listed? Is there a data dictionary? Is the data source on the wiki page? Great. The data has been enriched, checked for quality, and flagged as trusted. How does this new process look for an end user? To illustrate, let's take a look at a personal example at Tableau. As a success manager, it benefits me to understand our clients' footprints before calls. How many licenses? When is your renewal date? Do you have access to our add-ons? I've been told this information is stored in a table called assets, but I know nothing else about the table. Our data source management strategy allows me to look up data sources directly on Tableau, where I can see 442 results associated with assets. This is part of our self-governed model where anyone can publish ad hoc data sources. Thanks to our data certification strategy, I can quickly identify which one has been verified by our analytics team by looking for the green check mark, which, as you remember, confirms to me that the certification process has been followed. Interacting with the data source will reveal our metadata management strategy. I can hover over for a briefing on the purpose of this data source, including what a single row of data is, refresh cadence, and who owns and certified the data source. I can then click to see the data quality and enrichment process, explaining how the data was assembled, and click again for a data dictionary explaining all the columns and calculations. I've never met the owner before, but I no longer need to. This supporting documentation gives me the faith that I can trust this data and get started on my way. The combination of people, process, and technology allowed me as a business user to find, understand, and trust a previously unknown data source without any clarifying meetings. This model does not only fuel my ability to self-serve a new project, it also enables me to advance the work of others by self-serving on existing projects. Let's go back to my client footprint example. I discovered the same team had already created a dashboard to help us understand our client's footprint. Problem solved. Pack up and experience Tableau value. Not so fast. While the team is great at developing coherent data sources, their dashboards simply aren't as helpful. The solution provided to us was a crosstab of columns with instructions to export to Excel. This is the very scenario I've told you to avoid. Under a centralized operating model, I'd need to identify the owner, build a business case, and justify why this dashboard doesn't work for me, and further, why resources should be dedicated to enhancing it. What a slog. But fortunately for me, Tableau publishes the certified data source. Clicking on the Data Details tab reveals that our data source, Assets, is powering this dashboard. From here, I can quickly look up all of the documentation, connect using Tableau Desktop or web editing, and develop the exact view I need without any back and forth meetings. Now, looking at my client's footprint is as easy as selecting the company at the top and glancing below for all the information I need to be prepared for my next call. No Excel downloads, no pivoting, no additional calcs or cleanings, no confusion. Taking this one step further, I can share it with my colleagues struggling with the same questions, and we now see over 1,000 distinct users have viewed the dashboard 18,000 times. All of this was done without any business proposals or without taking any precious time away from the centralized team. This is how your data governance strategy proactively enables users with access and promotes scalable self-service solutions. This use case worked because I was able to find a trusted source. But with the boundless data sources needed to run a business, IT can't possibly verify every data point. They need to prioritize which data sources to spend their time on, and that's only possible with a monitoring strategy. In this visual, we are monitoring all activity coming off of data sources across 3 sites. Each square is a data source, sized by the number of actions taken off of it, and colored by whether it's a certified data source. Every action based off of an orange square is a decision built off of trusted data, where blue represents a decision based on ad hoc data. This is scary. Somewhere around 10% of decisions are made off of verified data. As an organization, you're going to want to push that number up. So let's think through a couple interpretations of this viz. Take a look at this large blue squares on the left. Their size and color indicates there's quite a bit of activity coming off of ad hoc data. These should be prioritized by IT to verify the accuracy of the data quality, create metadata models to instill faith, and certify to move over to the orange trusted decisions. Now take a look at the hundreds, if not thousands, of tiny blue squares on the right. How many of these are slight variations of the same data source, simply because users either don't know about the verified equivalent or are missing 1 or 2 columns for their own use case? IT should look over these to spot any patterns or duplications. They may be able to get rid of a portion of data sources by tweaking or guiding users to existing ones. Monitoring becomes crucial in understanding your data trust KPIs and informs your certification, communication, and consolidation strategies. The actions taken off of this monitoring will boost more data-driven decisions and increase the overall trust in your data economy. Now let's talk about the other half of our wheel. Content governance involves the processes needed to keep content relevant, accessible, and fresh. As use of analytic systems increase, a growing number of mission-critical decisions will become data-driven. The effect is not only an increase in content volume, but a broader range of user abilities contributing to the platform. As you empower more people, we need to make sure that the content itself can be governed, secured, discovered, and then trusted by people regardless of their skill level. This starts with a content management strategy, which begins with how you will standardize things like content organization structures and naming conventions. A good content management strategy should support certified and ad hoc content, making them easily distinguishable. Think again about the different levels of skills. You don't want people who don't have that level of data literacy to struggle with what is good content versus bad content. If you have too much content that is not governed, people will end up asking the question, can I trust this? Is this certified? Is this content good? We need to make sure ad hoc content is allowed, but that people can very easily distinguish it from what we've certified. So looking at our folders, marketing is a huge bucket. And if everyone in marketing starts dumping their material in this folder, users may start asking which of it they can trust. So we break out our top level projects into a new layer, including separate areas for sandbox or ad hoc versus production. You'll also want to keep your data sources separate from your dashboards in the spirit of keeping things neat. This creates an environment where ad hoc content by all users is allowed with full flexibility, but content quality and production is maintained because only a handful of trusted members are able to publish there. This doesn't mean that ad hoc content will never get to production. It just needs to follow the certification process before it gets there. What do we mean by that? The certification process is made up of 3 steps. How do we validate content? How do we promote content? And how do we certify content? Validating content involves ensuring quality, visual best practices are used, company branding is appropriate, and performance thresholds are met. Promoting content involves how you will physically move the content from sandbox to production once it has been validated. And certifying content involves filling in the content descriptions, confirming permissions, and defining the appropriate points of contact. This creates a world where certified and ad hoc content can seamlessly coexist side by side. You have users on the left generating content within a sandbox project where we can allow a lot of flexibility and a lot of freedom. Once content gets traction with important users of a high volume of users, we then have trusted members in IT validating it to make sure that even people who don't have strong data backgrounds can easily consume the content. And on the right, we have our certified content roped off and ready to inform key decision makers. This diagram is obviously a simplified version. As more users are enabled by the platform, you won't want one individual or group in IT to manage the entire content promotion process. Relying on one group risks creating a bottleneck or a scenario where they're not close enough to know what good looks like. So you want to delegate these promotion activities to business users who have the expertise to do this in a more focused setting. To fill this void, we're starting to see the establishment of project leaders as a more formalized role. This role consists of trusted business individuals trained to uphold the content promotion strategies set by IT. This will include ensuring that sandbox versus production projects exist, that the validation to promotion to certification process is followed, and other administrative tasks like setting permissions, groups, and monitoring for performance, something we'll talk about later. If we go back to our marketing example, the project leader role allows you to decentralize the content certification process into marketing sub-projects, empowering the smaller teams to be more agile while remaining compliant and alleviating the centralized team of administrative work. At this point, we've moved far away from our centralized approach to analytics. There are more content creators, more promoters, more viewers, more data-driven decisions being made across the business. But for the centralized team, far less control than you're accustomed to. You've set the governance framework, you've trained the people, you've configured the technology. Now it's time to trust. But also time to verify with a content monitoring strategy. A sound content monitor strategy leverages your analytics platform's usage data to correlate broad usage patterns and confirm that your governance strategies are playing out. From a content usage and quality standpoint, this data is your looking glass into how the business is using content. What content do they use? What content do they appreciate? What content are they not using? Is there a dashboard in Sandbox getting a ton of views or executive exposure? Well, you'll want to loop in your project leaders to action the content promotion cycle. Are there dashboards in production with little to no use? You'll want to understand why it's not being adopted and either react to boost adoption or take it off server to reduce clutter. Is there even a production and sandbox divide at all? Monitoring will help you regulate. From a performance standpoint, it's important to keep an eye on your KPIs. What's your average dashboard load time? What dashboards in production are unacceptably slow? How will you react to diagnose and optimize dashboard performance? Slow dashboards can hurt credibility of the server, and worse, push users to different platforms, forcing you to support multiple platforms at once. If you don't monitor, your success and performance is completely dictated by the anecdotal feedback of end users. An industry secret, guys, they're never going to send you an email thanking you for how great performance is. If performance is an issue, you want to proactively be on top of it rather than wait to hear about it from your frustrated end users. And with that, we come to a close on the Tableau Blueprint, our prescriptive guide of best practices on scaling out an analytics program. We've covered laying out a clear analytics strategy, assembling the right team, maintaining a performant environment, educating your organization at scale, organically bringing together your users, and tying it all together with people and processes that enable self-service and discovery. This has been a ton of information, and you may be asking, what now and how do we move forward?